So, Pam, before we dig in, can you say
Mhm.
your first and last name for me?
Yes, it's Pamela Capalad.
Capalid. Capalid.
Yeah,
Okay. I wasn't
it's
sure
like totally
how.
not how it's spelled at all.
Okay. Well, I wasn't sure because, like Filipinos have weird sounding last names. I thought it was maybe
Totally.
Capalad or something, but Capalid.
Yeah,
Capalid.
yeah,
Okay.
I've gotten it all. Yes.
Capalid. Hopefully, I don't screw it up here. All right. Howdy, hey, and hello there. Welcome to Weird Finance. Today, I'm speaking to Pamela Capalad. She's a certified financial planner, accredited financial counselor, and has been in the financial services since 2008. She founded Brunch and Budget to help people who felt ashamed or embarrassed about money have a safe place to make real financial progress. Pam has been featured in the Washington Post, Teen Vogue, Huffington Post, Vice Magazine, and was named New York Magazine's Best Financial Planner of New York in 2019. Pam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always so fun to hear my bio read by other people. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's
I
what it
know,
sounds
right?
like.
Where you're like, wow, I did all those things.
Totally. Oh my
Um,
gosh, I'm so excited to be here.
oh, I'm so excited to have you. Pam, before we dig into like all of the letters behind your name, right? CFP, AFC, before we dig into that and all of the wonderful, amazing, incredible ways that you help people navigate their financial lives, I first want to learn a little bit about you. You know, you and I are pretty similar. You and I have both been in financial services since 2008. I've been on the financial planning path before. I don't work as a financial planner today, but so much of everything I learned working as a financial planner informs my work here. Hold on, I feel like Ramsey's trying to chat with me because I see something in the chat here.
Oh, is my internet
No,
okay?
it wasn't Ramsey, it was the bot. Okay,
Okay.
sorry. So what I really want to know is how did you decide to study finance and how did you decide to become a financial planner? But before we get there, I want to know a little bit about your upbringing because something tells me
Oh,
you're a lot
yeah.
like me, right? Filipino American, first generation.
Hmm.
First of all, where did you grow up and what did your folks do for a living?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'll give you three guesses what my mom did for a living.
Post office, nurse.
Nurse, nurse,
Okay.
45 years. Oh my
Wow.
gosh, yes. Yeah, 45 years a nurse. She retired maybe, when did she retire? Maybe like 5, 6 years ago. So I grew up in the Bay Area in San Leandro, California, and I actually was born in the Philippines. So I lived in the Philippines for the first 2 years of my life with my grandparents while my parents came to America. My mom had been here before. When she was 22, she got the opportunity to come here as a nurse to come to the US. She landed in Alabama in
Wow.
her 20s, the first time she ever had raw vegetables in her life.
No.
Gave her a stomach ache. Yes, can you believe it? In the 70s. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. She couldn't find rice for like the whole first year that she was there. She couldn't find rice that she liked, that, that she could cook. It was hard to find a rice cooker.
Wow.
All of those things, yeah. And so she actually was in the US for 10 years in the 70s, came back to the Philippines because her dad died, and she met my dad there. And they decided to immigrate to the US and raise their family there. But they were nervous, so they had me and they left me with my grandparents for the first 2 years of my life while they figured out what it was going to be like in the US. Ironically, they had my brother while they were there.
Wow.
In the midst of all of that. So then they had my grandparents bring me. We started in LA when I was two, and then 2 years later we moved up to the Bay Area because I think she got a nursing job up there. So yeah, so I grew up in the Bay Area. I was there for, yeah, until I was 18. Then I went to school in Santa Barbara. But yeah, my mom was a nurse her whole entire career. And it's interesting that you asked this question because I don't know if she liked it. I don't know if she enjoyed the work at all. It was steady work. It was solid work. It was work that put food on the table. The sad part is my dad went to college in the Philippines and got an engineering degree, but the degree didn't transfer. didn't translate or transfer to anything that he could get in the US with that degree. So he actually worked minimum wage jobs for a while until they did the math and realized it was costing more for him to work and hire a babysitter to watch me and my brother than for him to just be a stay-at-home dad. So he
Wow.
was a stay-at-home dad for about half my childhood as well. Yeah.
Wow. So you've already seen non-normal gender dynamics in your household, which
Yeah.
is, I feel like, unusual at that time. Not so much now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, definitely.
wow. So I'm curious, like, like for you growing up, did you think that, definitely for me growing up, I felt like I only had a few options in terms of like success, right, with my career. And one of them
Hmm.
for sure was like, be a doctor, go all the way. Don't just be a nurse,
Don't
be a
just, yeah.
doctor. Then lawyer is really, really like
Yep.
another
Lawyer's
holy,
next.
yeah, like a grail, like a brass ring.
Hmm.
And then I feel like engineer is another one, which, your parents are doing a good job of fulfilling stereotypes over here.
I
Um,
know, right? Teacher was another option for me.
okay, that's
And
interesting.
also, my dad threw in prostitute. So,
He's like, if it's good enough for humanity since the beginning of time, it's good enough for my daughter, right? I like
there
that
you
your dad
go.
is like sex positive and also he
Sure,
realizes
that's why
that
you threw
sex
that
work is
in.
real work, right?
Yes, exactly.
I'm curious, like, did you have what was your upbringing like with your extended family? Did you have aunts and uncles that also immigrated here, and what kinds of jobs did they hold, and how did how did observing all of that inform your decision to study finance?
Yeah, so it was actually we were actually pretty isolated because most of my family was in the Philippines. I'd say when we first moved to the US, all of my family was still in the Philippines. And so we went back there every year. We tried to go back every year, and then my grandparents would come and visit us for like 3 months at a time. So that was kind of it. I didn't think about it this way, but there was a little bit of like intergenerational living going on because they would come and stay for so long. Like there's like memories of me like crawling into their bed when I was really young and being like, my grandparents are here, yay. But pretty much all of my family was in the Philippines until about a decade, maybe until I was about 10. We had one uncle who got the ability to move to Vancouver, Canada. And so that was the first family that we had in the US. And I remember we visited them, and he was like a big time architect in the Philippines,
Wow.
and he ended up working at Home Depot for like basically his whole career in Canada. So
So
yeah, because he couldn't.
wild.
Yeah, yeah, and just now, I'd say like 20 years later, he's doing freelance architecture. But what's amazing is that he has two girls, and one of my cousins is now does interior design.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, at like at an agency, and then my other cousin is a teacher. So yeah, so they came and found the Canadian dream in a way, but he really did have to. He sacrificed like a pretty thriving career in the Philippines to come here and give them
That's
that.
I think about this a lot, like, and I'm sure you feel some sort of pressure to like come, be in America and quote unquote succeed, like when you think about these
Yeah.
stories of folks who are giving up a thriving career to go to another place and hope for the best, oftentimes in the name of the next generation, I just can't wrap my head around doing that. Like if I chose to do
Yeah.
that today, I feel so ill-equipped. But I'm sure, they figured it out. I'm sure we would figure it out if that's something that we had to do. But yeah, tell me how you feel about the fact that your parents went through all that, the fact that you've seen your uncle make that sacrifice. We got a
Yeah. I mean,
helicopter. Hold on, Pam. I'm just going to pause for
oh
one
yeah.
second. So much drama over here in the city, right?
Totally.
Okay. I think we're good. Let me just put an end cap to that question.
Yep.
Do you ever feel a sense of shame, or maybe the proper term is guilt? Do you ever feel guilty that you made it to America where you had the opportunity to build a career and build a life, and not everybody gets that opportunity?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I said earlier that I don't know if my mom ever liked nursing or enjoyed it. She always seemed tired and a little upset. And I think about that a lot. I think about the fact that like my mom kind of did all the right things, you know? She saved, she maxed out her 401k, she learned about investments, she stayed at her job for as long as she could, she got the pension and all of that. And I remember the first year she retired, she was like, I'm too tired to do anything.
Hmm.
And she loves traveling and she was too tired to do that. And she, she she gave up a lot to do a career that she maybe felt ambivalent about, so that I could be here. And I think back to like the types of things that I complained about as a kid, like I wasn't allowed to like go out, I wasn't allowed to hang out with friends. Like the first time I went to the movies with someone other than my parents, I was like 18 in college.
Wow.
And yeah, I feel like I was very much straddled between like two different cultures and two different lifestyles. And I don't know if guilt or shame is necessarily the word that I would use. But I've been taking care of my own mental health since the pandemic, and also learning more about mental health in the context of personal finance. And I took an interpersonal neurobiology course for practitioners of color last year. And I mention this because one of the things that we unpacked was just like what our parents' capacity was in survival mode versus the capacity they were able to give to us, right? And so there's a lot of frustration that I have potentially like in the short term around like how my parents are and like, their limitations in terms of being able to talk about, what I consider like deeper issues or issues that, go above like the Maslow hierarchy of needs of survival, where we're able to talk about, more transcendent things. And I also, while I have that frustration, I also recognize that they gave me the opportunity to be able to build that capacity, right? And to be able to have the capacity to like go to therapy, to think about my mental health, to think about what makes me happy. One of the things that I think about all the time is like so I have a literature degree, surprise.
What?
Yeah.
All right, put a pin in that.
Yeah, you were like studying finance, and I was like, I didn't study finance actually, but I think about that all the time because I remember telling my parents I wanted to study literature, and my dad's reaction was literally like, we could just buy a car instead of sending you to college. And my mom was like, do whatever you want.
Huh.
And that was a moment for me where I was like, oh my gosh. She was like, I'm going to keep you as safe as I possibly can in the way that I know best for 18 years. And then go
Yeah.
to college, study whatever you want. I will pay for it, we'll apply for all the loans, whatever it takes, right? And she didn't even blink an eye when I told her that I was going to study literature and like read books for 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Bold,
I think that
Pam.
was huge.
So you studied literature, you read books for 4 years.
I did.
What?
Read books, put on plays, learned printmaking. I went deep.
Full liberal arts, huh? What's your
Oh,
alma
yeah.
mater?
UC Santa Barbara.
Okay, nice. I hear there's a party school too, so you probably got a good amount of partying in.
It is a party school. And I also so there's this little college within the university called the College of Creative Studies, which is exactly what it sounds like. And it was a school within the school where like I didn't have any prerequisites. I could take every class pass fail. I could drop a class up until the last day.
Wow.
I had no grades.
I love this.
Unless I wanted to. I could change the pass fail or grade structure up until the last day. So it was like the type of freedom that I never experienced in like academic life before, because I was straight A student except for PE. you know.
Can't win them all.
Yeah, and yeah, right. I had to pick math or PE, and I guess I picked math. But like to go to a school and not have to worry about my grades and like take anything I wanted, I definitely remember like taking a couple classes, and I remember I took one class and like I wanted to like my friends were planning a trip to Cancun, and it was during the final of one of my classes. So instead of taking the final, I just dropped the class and went to
Oh my God.
Cancun. I had a good
Wow.
time. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, you landed on your feet just fine. You're out here running your own business and things seem to be going well. So
Yeah.
can't fault you for that,
Not too
Pam.
shabby.
Right. So how do you get this literature degree and then you make this, to me, what sounds like a 180 and you're like, let's get into financial services and study for this really hard exam and become a certified financial planner? What happened there?
Yeah, I that actually happened in college too. So I took a random I answered an ad on Craigslist for a summer job. I was looking for something where I could stay in Santa Barbara during the summer, and I answered an ad for something called the Money Camp. And it was financial literacy camps for kids and teens between ages 10 to 17. And I did it for a summer, and I remember having to learn all the content as I was teaching it, right? I was learning about budgeting and saving and credit cards and entrepreneurship and the stock market and real estate, all of these things, like for the first time ever in my life. My
Wow.
parents never taught me. I never got it in school. Like maybe I learned how to write a check in high school. I don't know. But for the first time, because I had to teach these kids about money, I was learning about money. And I was
Wow.
like, oh my God, I don't have a credit card. Didn't know what a credit score was. And so I was like 19, like going in and learning all of these things. And that was the beginning of me being like, wait a minute, like, why didn't I get this when I was in school? Why didn't my parents know to teach this to me? Because my mom learned all this stuff the hard way, but it never occurred to her to like teach me any of it. Um, and so I did that for three of my 4 years in college, and I was doing teacher trainings. I was training other people how to run these money camps, and that's really what set it off. And in my last year at money camp, one of the camp counselors and I really hit it off, and she was a teacher. And so she taught me a lot of new things actually about teaching kids, and she and I hit it off to the point where we started our own company together as we were finishing Money Camp. And it's called Pockets Change. And it is, in its current iteration, it's a hip hop and finance program for youth. But it started off as us looking at each other and saying, this should be in every school in America. And really, we just started writing curriculum, and we just started writing what we learned. And as I left Money Camp and went into wealth management, which is the whole reason why I moved to New York, was to
Hmm.
really start my financial planning career here. I got my foot in the door at a financial planning firm, at a wealth management firm, through one of the people who I trained in a teacher training. I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I'm moving to New York. Do you have any job openings? And he said, yeah, why don't you come and interview? Let's see if something's here for you. And I started doing operations in the wealth management firm and writing this curriculum at the same time for teachers. And, she and I spent 2 years writing this like 300-page curriculum. And we went to present it at a big teacher conference with like 6,000 teachers. And we were like, oh my God, we're going to sell so much curriculum. This is amazing. We got an opportunity to present there. And we exhibited it in front of all these teachers. And every teacher came by, was like, oh my God, that's a great idea. And then they found out they had to teach it themselves. And they were like, oh, that's not for me.
Damn.
And we sold not one curriculum.
No. Oh. Well, it sounds like an invaluable fail. You know what I mean?
It was. The if you build it, they will come thing is not true at all. So we went back to the drawing board and we just said, listen, why don't we teach these ourselves? We're still passionate about this. We know how to teach these things. We wrote the curriculum for it. So we just started reaching out to organizations. And this is all while we had full-time jobs in our respective industries. So she continued to be in the education space and I continued to be in financial services. And we started just like reaching out to organizations and seeing if we would go teach the actual curriculum that we were teaching. And then around 2014, I'd say, we brought in my husband Dialect, to do a guest teaching spot because he's a hip hop educator and actually had a hip hop curriculum that was also a job and career program, a job prep and career program. And an organization had asked us to teach a career and job prep workshop. And we, of course, said yes, even though we didn't have one. And so luckily we brought him in and the program director loved him. And that's really where we saw the beginnings of hip hop and finance as a concept when teaching youth. And so that's where Pockets Change is now. But Brunch and Budget came in a little bit later down the road. I really, I'm gonna be honest, I really hated my first year in wealth management so much.
Why?
So it sucked. It was kind of boring. It was
Super
hard.
boring.
It,
Yeah. Well,
it was,
and you were in ops. You were in
I was in ops.
operations.
So like my first project was like I spent the first like 4 months transferring. Like an insurance agent had left one agency and came to our agency and took 1,000 clients with him. So
Oh,
I was
wow.
filling out 1,000 applications to open new
Yeah.
accounts like the first 4 months I was there. Just like every day, that was what I was doing.
Yeah. And
And I was,
in
yeah.
2008 too, I remember because I was working at a financial planning firm in 2010. And I
Mm.
remember to open up one account for one client, the ops team would walk over to my desk and give me like a 25-page stack of paper. They're like, the client needs to sign in 7 different spots. And I remember being like, do you want the money or not? Because
I
you're blocking the dollars by giving me 25 pieces of dead tree paper that I need to put
Mm-hmm.
into the computer and then get an older person to sign. Like it never made sense. But we are way, 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 way beyond that now. It's incredible.
Yes, thank gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I remember we sent a lot of FedEx documents out with all those tabs to make sure they didn't miss a signature, all that stuff. So I had to like tab up paperwork and all this stuff, and it was just like, what am I even doing here? I'm
Yeah.
supposed to my plan was to like be here for 2 years and like then go teach kids about money. And like a year in, I was like, what is happening?
Wait, so
So I
go ahead.
oh
Sorry.
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, is the kids education program, is that a nonprofit or for profit? First question.
It's both actually. Now it's
Smart.
both.
Very
It's a
smart.
hybrid.
Of course
Yeah.
it is. I expect nothing less from you. Um, okay, that's very smart. And then I guess my next question is, do you get to like, is that what really is exciting for you, or have you been lucky and blessed and really manifested your dreams, I suppose, in terms of feeling like lit up by all of your work, by the fact that you do get to teach kids, but you also get to work with clients one on one? I guess what I'm getting
Yeah.
at is, does one subsidize the other, or is it all the same to you?
That is a great question. So what's interesting is, so I got the opportunity to apply for a financial planning associate job. I'd say like 2 years in to my wealth management firm, and that is where things really shifted for me, and that's where the idea for Brunch and Budget really came from. Was I went from doing ops to actually like looking at clients' financial plans, being able to sit in on meetings, sit in on calls, and really seeing the financial planning happening, and at the same time um our friends didn't know anyone in finance, and they were coming up to me at parties and asking me questions about like, what's an IRA, like what is, how do I save money, what's my credit score, all these things that I was like teaching these kids, and now I was like talking to adults about it. And that is really where the idea for Brunch and Budget came. Was I was sitting around at a party with a friend, and we were by a fire pit in Brooklyn, classic scene. And she came up to me and said, Pam, I've never checked my credit score before in my life, but I'm so afraid to look. And I just said, do you want to do it over brunch or something? And her whole body relaxed. And she was like, oh my God, like a Brunch and Budget? And that's literally where the name came from.
Love
But
it.
at that moment, I remember I had that brunch with her. She made me food. We checked her credit score. And immediately afterwards, I emailed like as many friends as I had email addresses for. And I was just like, hey, if you want help with your finances, like just make me a meal or buy me a meal and let's talk, right? Because I realized that like my friends didn't not only didn't know who to go to, but were so terrified because they didn't even know what questions to ask. They were worried someone was going to judge them. They'd never even talked to their friends about this. And so that's really where Brunch and Budget came from. And it felt like Brunch and Budget and Pocket Change were satisfying like two ends of a spectrum, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Where it's like, of course my friends didn't get this information because I never got it. And then on the youth side, it's like, oh, and if we can start teaching the next generation now, then maybe they won't have to be in the same position that we were. And I don't actually teach kids anymore. That is actually, Dialect is now the director of pedagogy there and also co owner. I would consider him like the co founder of this iteration where it's hip hop and finance with our ED and longtime friend Andrea Ferrero. And so they actually, Pocket Change is fully like its own thing teaching kids about finance, and I will come in and guest and be like the CFP like in the room or like teach about cash flow projections or some complex things. And I still love getting the opportunity to teach kids, but I feel like I've really moved into this space now where I'm trying to, especially after everything I learned in interpersonal neurobiology, like trying to like understand like what inner child in us is like is where that shame and fear and embarrassment came within us that certainly happened in our childhoods and our young
Mm-hmm.
adulthood, where now we need to unravel and unpack all of that and really understand that the behaviors that we have today come from this history and potential trauma that we had around money when we were younger.
How vulnerable do you want to get today, Pam?
Oh my God, so vulnerable. Give it to me.
Okay, I want to know because I did this crazy like self-hypnosis last December, December before this last one.
Oh.
Right before my book came out, I was starting to feel scared. And I was starting to be like, oh no, you wrote a book with a big publisher, which means you're asking to be seen. You know what I mean? You don't like
Mm-hmm.
sign a deal with Penguin to not be seen. And so I was like trying to find ways to feel okay, like to feel right within, right? To feel like I'm going to get a 1-star review on Amazon. Someone's going to say the book is garbage and I need to feel okay about that. And so I did this like self
Mm.
hypnosis where, you know, you're supposed to go like in the subconscious and, you know, try to explore an early memory. And something that came up for me, which has been impacting my finances, which is jarring and shocking and amazing, was that I felt like this really, really early childhood wound that I didn't deserve safety and security. And it came from a lot of different things. Like it came from the dynamics in my household. It came from being queer. It came from being brown in a white world, short in a tall world, a
Yeah.
woman in a man's world, all those things. And since I've really worked on addressing and healing that, I've noticed that like revenue streams have gotten like like, you know, money is coming from places I didn't think it would come from. I'm making more money and I'm feeling less weird about spending. And so
Mm.
that's me putting my nugget on the table of one of the gnarly, crazy, you know, wounds that I found in myself. And I want to know what's yours.
Oh my gosh. I love that you brought this up because I am currently working with a somatic eating coach right now. And we have not talked about food once.
Wow.
Yeah, that's not true. We like talked about food maybe for like one session where she was like, do an experiment on something. But for all of the sessions that we've had, um, the thing that you just said is what came up for me. So we talked a lot about my childhood and like kind of constantly being in what she called a hypervigilant state. And so safety feels like being in control, being hypervigilant, always being able to like guess what the needs of the room are, right? Guess what the needs of the family members are. And so that is how, and, you know, it served me in a lot of ways. It was very much a survival tactic and a survival instinct. But because that to me equals safety, it feels unsafe when I'm not hypervigilant, right? When I'm not always like knowing where every dollar is going, where I'm not always like in full control of like how the money is coming in, where it's coming from, like, you know, knowing exactly what like my team members are doing at all times. Like, and that's something that I realized I had to start letting go of in the last couple years, just for like, just because it was impossible. But there was always still something like, there's always this gnawing feeling of like, oh, like, but what are they doing right now? You know, even though I, I would filter myself with them. And working with a somatic eating coach and understanding like the relationship that I had between like this hypervigilant state and needing that to feel safe is something I'm still working on it. I'm just aware of it now,
Yeah.
right? I haven't really unraveled it. And I feel like I'm still in the midst of like, in that like limbo state of like, this is who I was. I can see who I might become over there. But like right now, I'm like, who the fuck am I?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. And I think that it's showing up in my money in a lot of ways too. And I think that it's showing up in my business in a lot of ways.
Do you work with clients in this capacity? Do you help them kind of unpack what these things are, right? Let's just call them core wounds. You can use other language if you'd like, but is that something you do as a financial planner? Or do you refer that out to like a therapist? How does that work?
So we're also kind of in this in between state as well, because we do a little bit of that work, but it started getting to the point where it was like, should we be doing this kind of work? Right. And
Yeah.
this is why we took this interpersonal neurobiology course. And in particular, in our Sea Change program, which is financial planning specifically for people of color, we wanted to understand how to help people unpack these kinds of things and how that's related to money, and also understand what we could equip ourselves with and where the line was for us in terms of like, okay, and that's something to talk to your therapist about. So we're in the midst, I would say right now, of creating more formalized programming around that, because we found ourselves doing it informally because we found it coming up. You know, a lot of clients like would jokingly say like, oh my God, that was like a therapy session. And we'd have to be like, no, it wasn't, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. Because those kinds of things would come up and we would walk them through that and talk them
Right.
through like, hey, this is why that's happening. And because our team has met with so many people, we've been able to see patterns and been able to say, hey, it's not just you, you're not
Right.
alone, this is very common, right? This is something that comes up a lot. And so that kind of sense of relief that you bring someone, and also like, and also these are the solutions that have worked for other people, try out what works for you. I think that the work that we're moving towards is, let's uncover this, but we are not your therapist, so let's also figure out the financial action steps to take to address this, and also acknowledge it but not let it keep you stuck, because that's where we were at with clients last year. I'd say is we helped them acknowledge it, but we weren't sure how to help them kind of get unstuck.
Yeah.
And so that's the evolution that's happening this year with the course that we took.
That was going to be actually my next question, was because I struggle with this in my work too, is how do you just simply acknowledge that marginalization is real and there are all these impacts to like living in a racist system, but not to
Mm-hmm.
dwell on it, right? And not to like get too identified with being a victim. And that's been an interesting, I think, it seems like a lot of people are waking up to this idea, or at least kind of scratching the surface and trying to, recognize that the acknowledgement seems like, when I say it out loud, I'm like, it seems weird that that's what a lot of people are looking for. But I see that reflected in my own audience. Like, so many people are so excited about my book just simply because I'm like, hey guys, it's fucked up out there, huh?
Yep.
Like, cool, I mentioned that, but like, where's our agency? So it sounds like you're
Yeah.
also trying to find your footing in that space as well.
Yeah, that is really the other side of it. And I think that that is also why a lot of folks joined Sea Change, was because we actually just mentioned the racial wealth divide and said like, hey, this is a real thing. This is a real obstacle that you have to deal with. Like, the system is designed for you to fail, by the way, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that we had the action steps to get people out of it, but the the other barriers are things that we're working on addressing now. And it comes down to like the simplest things, like, or what we think in the financial industry are simple, like filling out an application, getting some paperwork in, like
Right.
we've started looking into paperwork anxiety, and that took me down the rabbit hole of the history of paperwork and
Oh,
how
wow.
the history of paperwork, yeah, yeah, and it's of course it's racist.
Yeah.
Of course it is. But the paperwork started off as something that a business filled out for you to make their
Huh.
back end easier. It would be a relationship builder and also something that's efficient on the ops side. And the switch really happened in the 20th century when large social welfare programs started being created. The government decided to put the onus of completing the paperwork on the people receiving the social welfare benefits, which of course largely affected communities of color. And then paperwork went from like a relationship building tool to now a barrier to access, because now you fill out paperwork, and if you don't, oh well, if you fill it out wrong, oh well, if XYZ, like I think about everything from like why we have to do our own taxes when the government already has our information, all the way down to like, why did we have to fill out like a student loan forgiveness form
Hmm.
when they know how much debt we have and they know our tax returns? They could
Yeah.
have just like done it.
They could
But
have.
no, we had to fill out a form, a simple
Right.
form,
Right.
you know?
This gives me an idea. We should have like paperwork parties, where we just get on a Zoom and everybody fills out paperwork together, and it's just like we're all here suffering, and you and I are there
Suffering.
just energetically being positive, right? And saying like, you
Oh
can
my
do it.
gosh. I love that, because we do forms of that in Sea Change and in our one-on-one program Budge, where we call it financial advocate calls, but we'll literally sit there and do paperwork with clients or open accounts with clients, or like call customer service with clients, right? Because
That's
even those kinds of calls, it's like vocal paperwork.
totally,
It's like
for sure.
verbal paperwork.
Yeah, even knowing
Yeah,
how to
no,
ask the
totally.
right questions is on a phone call. I noticed some of my friends, they'll hit me up and they're like, "Hey, I'm getting screwed for a thing. I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
to get out of this. Can you just help me?" I'm like, "Wow, yeah, okay, like let's get on the chat and I'll tell you exactly like, what to say, how to say it." My collections background definitely comes in handy sometimes.
Yeah,
Um, all right,
totally. Well, and the
I'm
paperwork parties thing, I'm like, those are the kinds of things that go beyond acknowledging that the system sucks, right? And that
right.
that you are like a cog in it or whatever. Is like, how can we take agency over it? How can we bring joy to things that people have taken all the joy out of? And I think that's such a huge part of our work, and it's really like the evolution of our company in a lot of ways. Like this year for us is all about like getting shameless about money. And that's a
Hmm.
big part of it. It's like, fuck yeah, I'm going to a paperwork party. You want to come?
Yeah, I love it. Pam, I'm so enamored with your program Sea Change. And for a lot of reasons. I love that it's a group program. Am I correct in saying that it's a group program, right? Um, or is it not a group
Yes and
program?
no. It's
Okay.
so that's been an evolution too.
I feel like the last time we spoke, it was a group program and it
It
was on a sliding
was.
scale, right? Is it still
It's
on a
still on
sliding
a
scale?
sliding
Okay.
scale.
Eh,
It is. It's so I did like some research around like what people are calling group programs in financial planning, and if you don't
Okay.
mind me going down the rabbit hole with you,
Let's do it.
um group financial coaching or group financial planning, um from what I found, are small cohorts for a very short period of time, usually between 30 days to 3 months. And with Sea Change and with all our programs, we found that it takes at least a year to really start to feel like this work that you're doing is integrated into your life, right? And so we started off doing group in Sea Change when we were beta testing it, but what we realized was it was more about community and one-on-one. So it was about being able to have access to a coach to like message them to ask a very like specific personal question, but also to be able to go to a group or a community in a community setting and ask questions of the community or hear other people's ideas and things like that. So we have a group setting, but what's interesting is that it's not like the group is like learning all of the same things together. It's that everyone is going through their own individualized process within a community where we're all doing the same thing, if that makes sense.
I love that. Yeah. And sea changes specifically for people of color who are trying to build wealth, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And
exactly.
I mean, I think I already probably know the answer, but what prompted you ultimately to create something like this?
Yeah, it was really just like meeting people for brunch. And, when I was in wealth management, we had 400 clients, and I can think of one client in my head who was not white. Um, and when I started meeting with people for brunch, I was meeting with way more people of color. And I realized that my certified financial planner designation did not equip me for being able to serve them. And so I had to learn a lot of things on my own, and also use the strategies that I learned in a different way. Like, for instance, I like to say that our clients of color, all first generation something, right? First generation in this country, first generation to graduate college, first generation to have like a professional salary, first generation to be able to buy a home, right? And so all of these things combined often meant that our clients of color had more student loan debt. They were the financial safety net for their families. They didn't have a history of homeownership in their family. And so there was this like extended family planning. That aspect of it alone was like something that the CFP not only didn't teach you how to do, but kind of discouraged you from doing. They were
Yeah.
very like nuclear family focused. And so I started noticing more and more patterns around like working with our clients of color. And also Dialect and I, uh, we we started a podcast in 2014, also called Brunch and Budget. And as we started doing more and more research for the podcast, we started running into the racial wealth divide. And all of these stats, we started learning about these stats that proved anecdotally what I was seeing with my clients. And we realized there isn't a space for people of color to really talk about this because, one, we were taught in our communities that it was taboo to talk about money, right? And for a lot of our parents, they didn't know how to teach us, and they got us to the point where they're like, okay, you went to college, now you're going to be the one who can help us, right? And so where can you go where you can really learn about your personal finances through the lens of someone who's first generation something, someone who has more debt, someone who has more financial obligations, and not have a financial planner tell you like, oh, well, just cut your family off, then you'll be able to save money, which has literally happened to a number of my clients.
Wow.
And to have someone understand like, hey, your core values are different than the core values that I was taught as a CFP. And so let's start from your core values and go from there. And I think that is really where this idea for Sea Change came from.
I love it. So is it enrollment on a regular basis? Do you have like windows where people can sign up? Tell us more about how people can sign up for the program.
Yeah, you can join anytime. That's one of the reasons why we shifted it from a group program to more of a community-based and one-on-one program, is because we used to have a closed enrollment, and people would like wait for 2-3 months for the enrollment to happen. It was like, oh wait, but I needed it 3 months ago, and now I'm in a different place, or now I actually can't afford it anymore, And so we wanted to really catch people, again, meeting people where they are and catch people when they needed us. And so you can enroll anytime and just start, integrating yourself into the community. We have weekly brunch club Q&As. You can come and talk to a financial coach for an hour. You get assigned a financial coach. You can message anytime one-on-one. You can ask questions of the community at any time. And this year, we're actually going to start hosting block parties, virtual block parties. We're going to have experts come in and chat with our Sea Change members about specific topics.
I love it. Put me down for one. I'm inviting myself.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I was going to ask you that offline, but thank you for saying that out loud.
Yeah, perfect.
Yay.
I appreciate you taking the time and getting vulnerable with me and sharing your story, your path, where you've been, where you're going. I just want to say I'm really, really grateful that somebody who's equipped and as smart as you with all this experience is giving back to the community. So before I let you go, Pam, I do want to hit you with some rapid fire questions if you're ready for them.
I'm ready. I think I'm
All right.
ready.
Okay. So my first question is, do you have anything that you purchased that you feel like was money well spent? And maybe it might on the outside look really frivolous, but to you it's really meaningful for whatever reason.
Dyson vacuums. I remember I
Oh,
was like, yeah, you know, right? But I bought a Dyson vacuum when I was 23,
wow.
not 35.
First of all, I've only seen it in the wild. I've never bought one or used one, but
Oh,
tell us why it's worth the price tag.
oh my God. And it seems ridiculous because I, at 23, spent $350 on a vacuum, which is
Wow.
nuts, right? I know. But the thing about Dysons is they're just so satisfying to use. They are, and I hate cleaning. So
Okay.
I'm not someone who's like, oh, I love cleaning. Oh my gosh, vacuums are so great. I don't like vacuuming. And I always think vacuuming doesn't do anything.
Wow.
And like,
It's a show. That's
I know, right?
yeah.
But my mom owned a Dyson, and I remember using it at her house probably when I went back from college. And I was just like, oh my God, this thing is amazing. And now I've evolved to the Dyson cordless vacuum, which, like, yeah, don't even get me started. It will change your life.
How much was that, Pam?
That was also $350 because I did the frugal thing and bought the model right before the new model that came out.
I love that. So, what I'm hearing is the financial planner is giving you advice to spend money on something that is satisfying and the quality is really great and you can still find ways to be frugal about it. Um, yeah, I love this. I would have never pegged you as a Dyson vacuum kind of a person. Um, what's one piece of advice, financial or otherwise, that you'd give to your younger self?
So I would tell my younger self to start therapy sooner and
Mm,
look for a woman of color therapist. I did therapy in college, just like situational therapy for some things that I was going through in college, and it was a great experience. And then I tried looking for a therapist when I came to New York because it was a big life transition, and like met with three therapists and kind of hated them all. And I was like, okay, I don't need therapy. I can just talk to my friends. And then the pandemic happened, and I started seeing a therapist during the pandemic, and she was great. Um, but then I started seeing a therapist who was a Filipino woman,
mm,
and that was a game changer for me. And I feel like I mean, I don't know how, if I had possibly started working on these things sooner in my 20s, in my early 30s, um, then I don't know if I would be in a different place, but I feel like I would be a little bit more at peace.
mm. Heal your wounds, y'all. Heal them.
Yeah.
All right, next question, Pam. Do you have any financial, sorry, did you have any financial superstitions growing up?
Am I allowed to share my parents' financial
Yeah,
superstitions? I
for
don't know if I
sure.
believe them, but the things that come to mind are the money frog. Frogs
Okay.
are apparently a sign of prosperity and money in Chinese superstition. And so when I was growing up, my mom would always buy frog figurines. And I had no idea, but we just had so many frog figurines in the house. And finally, I think when I was a teenager, I realized that it was like a sign of money and prosperity. I just thought it was like my mom's favorite animal, but like no, it was about that. And then the other thing that she had was she had a lot of laughing Buddhas around,
Sure.
and she would tell you to like rub their belly for like prosperity and money and things like that. So
Your
yeah,
mom would make you rub the belly.
yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
How many frogs are we talking, just for context?
I wouldn't even know because, oh my gosh, that's a really good question. I don't think I've ever counted, but I would say, because my mom loved figurines in general, but I would say like at least a third of the figurines were frogs.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of
It's a lot of
frogs.
frogs. Um, Last one is, do you have any financial fumbles that you can look back on and laugh at?
Yes. I feel like the biggest one that I had was I moved to New York with like $1,000 in the bank and like $3,000 in credit card debt and no job, which like that happens, right? People do
Sure,
that.
sure.
But when I told my mom I was moving to New York, I told her I was moving for a job,
Hmm.
and she surprised me
Oh
with a
no.
visit to help me move in.
Oh no.
And so I had to pretend to go to work
No, you didn't.
while she was here. Yes.
Where did you go? To the library? To McDonald's? What did you do?
Well, I actually did have some job interviews, so I did
Okay,
need to be
so you
like,
didn't.
okay, I have to go to job interviews.
Yeah.
But I had like two, and she was here for like a week. So I just like went to the park
Oh my God.
for like
I'm so entertained
I
by
just
that.
remember sitting in Bryant Park for like hours and being
Wow.
like, okay, this is New York.
Oh my gosh, Pam, that's hilarious. Thank you for sharing that. It has been an absolute joy and pleasure chatting with you about money, about your journey. Where can the people follow along and where can the people find you on the internet?
Yeah, so you can find Brunch and Budget at Brunch and Budget AND on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We're starting on TikTok. And brunchandbudget.com to learn more about everything that we do.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Pam.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was honestly so fun. One of the funnest podcast conversations I've had.
I'm so flattered. We'll have to have you come back sometime.
I love it.